Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, RB Laws, and this is my co-host.
Christopher Wells.
We appreciate all the recent support on the content we have been putting out. We will be covering Team USA, Summer League, and free agent signings as they happen. Before we do get started with today's episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the OBT Podcast for more content and updates.
So USA basketball game 1 underway, already completed, I guess, actually more so. And it was Team USA with a good win over the Canadian basketball team, right? Obviously, it was 86-72 or 86-72. And it was a rough start, right? It was a starting lineup that I didn't really expect. It had Steph, Holiday, LeBron, Booker, and Embiid. I think, our starting five was a little bit different, but at the time when we talked about it, that was before it was announced that Durant had been hurt. So obviously he wasn't able to play, so that changed it up a little bit. It felt kind of weird because when the starting five was trotted out, right, it felt like it was kind of going small for small. Obviously Embiid, is much bigger than the other guys that were playing for Canada, because Canada's starting five was pretty small too, right? Because you had SGA and Jamal Murray, and then you had like Dylan Brooks as a 4 with RJ Barrett, and then Dwight Powell as your center.
Right.
But it was just, it didn't look great early on, mainly on offense, right? Like the defense was okay, but they couldn't score. And then Canada, was kind of getting down there and just kind of doing whatever they wanted to. You could tell with Embiid that he probably still isn't 100%, right? He looked kind of slow. On both ends of the floor, they were forced to play drop because, you have to play a different type of coverage with him. But as soon as that second unit came out there, right, then they basically blew the whole game wide open, right? Like you had Ant-Man, Tatum, right, Halliburton, Bam, and AD, they were able to get a ton of stops, right? AD had like 4 blocks and 11 rebounds in 19 minutes of play, right? Bam Adebayo had like 7 rebounds, didn't have any blocks, but still contested and altered a lot of shots. Also had 6 points, right? Jason Tatum, right, kind of picking up where he left off, in the playoffs, right, with 8 points and a rebound, 4 of 7, some drives to the rim, because it was a pretty balanced offensive effort, even though it wasn't pretty. But, as the main standout is the defense. Like, Team Canada, just look at the, because obviously if you look at Team USA, they shot 50 from the field and 30% from 3, right? And some of that got boosted a little bit. But either way, but then look over at Canada, 34 from the field, 21 from 3, right? Starting backcourt went 5 for 18. Jamal Murray and SGA, those are 2 very good offensive guards. Obviously, Dwight Powell doesn't really stand a chance. He did have 2 points, but he was 0 for 2. Dylan Brooks kind of doing hero ball stuff, 3 for 8. A couple of other bizarre plays in terms of fouls, right? RJ Barrett was fine, 3 of 6, 12 points. Olynyk off the bench, fine, but it was, with the Team USA, it was a solid win, right? Like it started off ugly, but it got better over the course of the game, mainly on the defensive end. Now I think you're just kind of hoping, I guess, that Durant can come back and play, because then obviously will boost your offense while not really doing anything bad to your defense, right? Because presumably he's going to start. That'll make your starting five bigger, and you're not going to really sacrifice much on offense, if any. So you do kind of wonder how the starting five changes a little bit, right? Obviously there was also, some other big news before the event, because Kawhi Leonard was out. He's going to be replaced by Derek White. So that kind of hurts, the intrigue that the lineup, in terms of how the lineup would look. But, again, you still have a lot of other talent to kind of get it done. But, I liked, what I saw from the defensive end. It was just kind of funny how you could clearly see some other guys, like when they were out there, the difference was very stark. And again, it's Olympic basketball, which is different from, regular NBA basketball. So there are going to be some guys where their games are going to look different in this setting than others. Like, say, even an Embiid. Like, we know he's good. It's just obviously, like, they're not going to be running a lot of plays for him in the post like you would, in the NBA, right? Like, you're not going to set him up at the free throw line or at the top of the key, like you would for Philly. And, it's just going to be different, right, compared to, what you're going to see, like, say, with the bigs coming off the bench. And also on defense, too, same thing, where, like, with AD and Bam, they can switch their feet and move around on the perimeter better than an Embiid. And, again, like, Embiid's going to start, he's going to play, a decent amount, because you wouldn't try to recruit him over here and then he doesn't start. But it's just kind of intriguing. But there's so much talent, and you can find different lineups to make things fit that it's not going to matter.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, this was I I would say,
Exhibition.
yeah, I mean, it was an exhibition match, but I would say it technically was dominant. If you look at it from the perspective that I am, where it's like they laid out the blueprint for success here. The starting lineup, I think, is going to be fluid depending on who they match up against, because, I don't think you can run this starting lineup against, say, France when they play them. Like, that's not going to happen because you're going to have to go up against Gobert and Wemby. So, that's going to be a little bit different. But, for this game, I think, the main takeaways. This was Joel Embiid's debut for international basketball. He's never played for Cameroon. He's never played, in the international setting, in the international rules or anything like that. Yeah, exactly. So, I wasn't impressed with him, but like you said, I don't think he's necessarily the focal point. He's definitely not the number one option. You probably won't be able to see him capitalize on that back to basket play as much. So I think they're going to probably rely on his skills as a defender, his frame, and things of that nature. So interesting from that perspective. Like you talked about, Drew Holiday being in the lineup, that was pretty cool to see. He's clearly still got it on the defensive end. Steph Curry as well. I think that was pretty cool to see his Olympic debut alongside LeBron. I think everybody was really hyped up for that. We got an awesome, picture perfect moment between him and LeBron, him throwing the lob to Bron. That's kind of what everybody's wanted to see from both those guys throughout their careers. So awesome that we got to see that. And Steph was very efficient. And I really liked what I saw from him because he's not like the number one guy either. Clearly, right. He's like kind of asserting himself into this awesome automatic 3-point shot role player for a stacked team. And that's pretty cool.
I guess the question is, who is the number one option?
I mean, if you want me to be real, I think it might be Edwards, bro. And his role is kind of interesting because he's like the spark plug 6-man, which was interesting. I don't know if that's going to be the case, for every single game that they do play.
I thought he was going to start.
I thought he was going to start because, not that he's necessarily better than Booker. Maybe, I guess you can make the case, but like defensively, I think he's better than Booker, and maybe even playmaking at this point, because I really liked what I saw from him, creating opportunities for other people. And even so, like, he had people that were wide open and he's still pulling it up over to people, in the mid range. So I think the confidence is there for him to be the number one option. I liked what I saw from him. I think everybody owes Tyrese Halliburton an apology. Yeah, from the field, maybe not too efficient, but I think he showed why he belongs there. He can be a scrappy defender at times, get steals, play the lanes. Obviously, we already know his playmaking is elite. He was able to find some guys. Jason Tatum, that's another guy. I think he's, he showed why he belongs here in this company. Yeah. I know a lot of people were like, why is, Jason Tatum here and Jaylen Brown isn't? We weren't. I think we love the idea. You can see his body. He looks in the best shape of his life. So, and he proved it, he was going down the lane, really with no mercy, just kind of going after these guys. But the USA, they're going to make their bread and make their money off of the fact that they're super duper dominant and super deep. If you look at Canada, like past maybe like 6-7 man, like they don't really have anybody. The US, they have a bunch of guys, like you said, that didn't even play. KD, Derek White. Once those guys get asserted in, I think it's wraps. But yeah, I think I loved everything that I saw from every single guy out here. There were some funny flub up moments where you're like, all right, bro, like, can we lock in? The first quarter was disgusting. Like, that actually had me on the edge of my seat. I was like, what are we doing? Are we actually about to drop this game? But, the cavalry came in and we got the job done. And, they look dominant and they're going to win these games based off their defense because their switchability, everybody can kind of rotate in, rotate out. And, I think it was kind of interesting because I think the analogy that Grant Hill used was like something along the lines of like a piano recital where it's like not everybody's, the piano player. You have to have the piano mover. So everybody has to find their role, basically, which I think is true. Because, you can't have a world where Steph, LeBron, and Anthony Edwards are the number one option. It's got to be one guy and everybody else kind of fills in.
Right. And it's like, you also kind of look at it as compare this to the last team, right? Not the Olympic team, but say like the one that was in the, the World Cup or whatever it was a couple of seasons ago, right? And, that looked different, right? Obviously, because like you had more guys on that team that were, I mean, also like the talent wasn't as good, but you also had some guys on there that were more offensive oriented players. But, there's way more two-way guys on this roster in addition to there being better talent. So like you have guys where it's like, even if they're not getting touches on offense, they can still do other stuff. Like either if whether it's offense or defense, like they could play off the ball, they can, screen and roll, they can cut, they can make the secondary passes, or again, also defense. Like say like, like LeBron, like he can get some rebounds, he got a block. I think he had like 3 steals, right? Because again, you're not asking him to do as much scoring wise, right? Like in a stage like this,
No.
Compared to, you're asking him usually to give you like 25 or whatever for the Lakers.
Right.
Right. And so same with all these other guys, right? Like Jason Tatum, right? Like, again, like only had like 8 points, but they were like 8 crucial points, right? Where it was like he had a stretch where he just was kind of able to just bully his way to the basket, right? And then obviously like even like an AD, right? Just comes in 10 points, 11 rebounds, like a solid double with 4 blocks and some cheese off the bench.
Yeah, he was a demon. He was cooking like for Olympic standards. Yeah.
And like you said with Edwards too, right? Where he comes in and has like, a stretch where, he just gets to his spots and just rises over guys and just easily scores.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
his first bucket I think told the story where it's like the guy pretty much double tap square on a layup and that thing, like it looked beautiful, Yeah,
exactly. So it's like that's the cool thing about this team, like you said, is that there's a lot of versatility with a lot of different players on the roster in a way that makes this better than a lot of the previous ones. And like you said, it may not be a night where they score 100+ points and blow teams out by like 50 or whatever, like say the Dream Team,
right?
Like these may be lower scoring affairs where like maybe they're not necessarily blowing the other team out, but they're shutting them down. And, they're able to use that to get out and run and score, right? Because, you're not stopping this team in transition too easily because there's a lot of terrific players out on the break soon as they get stops.
I mean, look at the roster and their identity. If you go person by person, there's probably only a handful of guys that are completely offensive oriented and probably only like 2 or 3 if you want me to be real. Right. Everybody else has a solid defensive game to them, especially a defensive game that's going to bother people who may not have ever had to have been guarded by Kevin Durant or something like that, especially on that international stage. It's very different. But US, they need to build the chemistry for sure. That's number one. The chemistry was lacking. They were looking like they were having fun. That's cool. But at the end of the day, they need to iron out the details and, no more lousy turnovers where, you may think you're dealing with D'Lo off the ball, but no, this is Steph, bro. And that's not like a shot at LeBron. That's just the first one that came to mind because it was kind of funny where I'm like, oh, wow, that was an off-target pass from LeBron, which we don't see very often. But it's because, these guys aren't used to playing with each other outside of, say the All-Star game. And that another thing, because I wanted to bring this up because I have been hearing a lot of odd discourse about it. What do you think about Jaylen Brown not being on the team?
Yeah, so that was, obviously something that people had talked about, right? Because I think he, I don't know if he's doing it intentionally, right? But he kind of like almost in a way exacerbated it because he had the tweets online, right? That were kind of timed with, when it was announced that Derek White was going to be there. I mean, again, like, it's kind of like, say, like let's say having like Tyrese Halliburton versus Jalen Brunson, right? Like it's not necessarily just specifically about the talent. It's also about like the fits as well, right? Like Derek White, you can fit in, really easily. Not that you can't fit Jaylen Brown in easily, but like look at Derek White's role on the Celtics, right? Like he's not in a role where he's playing a ton of ISO ball, one-on-one scoring. Like it's mostly like, sometimes pick and roll, spot up, like a lot of basic plays, right? Where it's like that he can fit in pretty much anywhere. And, I think that's just simpler to fit in. But I can also understand the perspective of like, this guy's really good. So it's like, and he's better than Derek White. He's the finals MVP. Why isn't he on the roster? But like, it doesn't always work like that. Like say like in 2016 or whatever, right? Like, which I guess was the year after the Warriors won the title. Like they weren't asking Andre Iguodala to be on Team USA. Like sure. They weren't asking Kawhi Leonard in 2014 to be on the, the World Cup scenario or whatever. Like it's just, it's just not how this always goes.
Yeah, and I think, people on ESPN, they made a great point. It's not the All-Star game, We're not looking for necessarily, the best of the best in terms of all-around talent, and where it's like, we need all superstars. We need some role players in here as well. And I think Derek White, like you said, is the perfect piece because number one, he can guard virtually 1 through 4. And also offensively, what he brings is very consistent. We know that he can spot up. We also know that he has pretty good touch for a guy of his size and stature. So, I think adding him in allows you to kind of have a Swiss Army knife of sorts. And I think, if you look at Derek White, I think what he brings is a little bit more similar to what a Kawhi Leonard would bring, to Team USA versus Jaylen Brown. That might be a hot take. I don't know. But I feel like Derek White's defense is more in line with what, they'd probably be missing, with Kawhi being out, which really does stink.
Yeah, sure. And, just kind of also just kind of mentioning some of the team defense stuff, it's also kind of cool where it's a lot of these guys, because they're surrounded by other really good defenders, they're going to look even better. Yeah. Say, it's a lot easier to kind of just be say the starting 5 with Embiid, right? They're not switching as much, right? They're doing drop. And so, but that requires guys to fight over the screens. And it's it's, Steph is going to be in Booker. They're going to be more than willing to fight over screens when they have all these other, guys to help them out, defensively. Or say with an AD where he's out there and he's able to block shots and he's not the only guy back, right? Because he's not playing next to D'Lo, Austin, and Rui. He's right. Playing next to Bam, and Edwards and others. Right. Same for Bam, right? Because say in Miami, right? You're not playing next to Tyler Hero, and Duncan Robinson, sure. Or others, right? You're playing next to some, other top tier defenders as well, right? So that's kind of the cool thing, to see all these guys, kind of come together and adjust and play different roles. Say with Halliburton, you don't need him to score 20 whatever a game like he does for Indiana. You just need him to kind of be an additional playmaker off the bench. He had 6 assists. He had 4 steals as well, so he can use his length to get after it defensively. So that's kind of the cool thing with all these players, because they're so good at so many different things. They can kind of just morph their games into whatever they need, what they can morph their games into whatever their team needs from them, right?
Yeah.
So and that's the cool thing. Because say in a normal NBA game, if Tyrese Halliburton had 2 points, right, you probably would be yeah, this guy didn't have a great game.
Yeah, he would have been he would have gotten blown out. But I think you were talking about, right. You're probably going to see the guards probably gamble a little bit more, which is good because it's probably going to pay off. In terms of trying to get steals and stuff, gambling on the passing lanes, just jumping the gun on a lot of routes and stuff like that. So yeah, dope to see for sure. I think this was an awesome first exhibition in terms of defense. They really showed what the identity is. It's not necessarily offensive firepower, offensively focused squad, but it is for sure, defensive minded, because look at all the two-way guys here.
Exactly. Yeah. So the next game up, right, is July 15th. So you're talking about, next Monday or whatever.
Yeah.
And they play Australia this time, not in Vegas, but they're in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
Right. So, again, they are hoping that Durant comes back, right? So, assuming he comes back, I'm going to assume he slides into the starting 5 and takes the place of whom?
Probably Drew.
Is it Drew Holiday? Is it Booker? Because, I feel like if you're going to put Durant in there, I feel like you want to have Holiday out there for the defense, but then it's Booker's also the better player. So, that's where I'm kind of curious to see what they do with that.
KD has to start. Simple as that. He's the Olympic GOAT. That's why I'm who is it going to be?
Right. Yeah. I know he's going to start.
Yeah.
And also, you're not going to recruit him to come to Team USA to come off the bench. And he was on the last one that won gold. So
yeah, he's the Olympic GOAT.
That. Yeah, I'm just kind of curious as to who's going to come off, who's going to slide to the second unit. Presumably either Booker or Holiday.
Yeah, he's going to start, so somebody's got to come out.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to be Booker or Holiday, I guess, is the question.
Probably Book. I think it's got to be Book, if you want me to be real. I do like what Book brings, because even in this exhibition game, we saw that he could be a spot up option. You know, we saw the connection that he and Anthony Edwards have, which is why I'm going to assume that they'll I don't know, because is it? I think it's possible to play Ant-Man and Devin Booker at the same time. I think Booker's that was clear.
Yeah, Booker's a point guard for Phoenix. So, presumably
it was clear. They played multiple possessions during this game together, and they looked great. I thought that was one of the top 2 duos that we saw on Wednesday. But I don't know.
But then it's like,
I like what Holiday brings on the defensive
yeah,
end because it was so
right,
potent. You could see it.
right. But then it's like if you move Booker to the second unit, then you're gonna have Halliburton and Booker and Edwards all out there at the same time. I guess.
Holiday's got to go. It's got to be Holiday. I think they're gonna start KD.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like a lineup with Steph Curry, KD, Book, and LeBron with Embiid at the 5, I think that's pretty unbeatable. But at the same time, like that lineup, if you slot KD in there and take out Drew Holiday, I feel like that gives you a little bit less room for error on the defensive end. Like
Yeah, the perimeter defense is worse, but the like length, I guess, is quote unquote
and
better.
your
But
offense
also,
gets
like,
better
Holiday's
too.
a better, yeah, but also like Holiday's like a better defender, I guess.
Yeah, your offense, you know, gets extremely exponentially better if you put KD in there. Which may be, something that they look to because I think they have what it takes to be a great defensive team. We already said that. Because I think now they're trying to find offense. And that was clearly the issue. Like, how can we get these guys to gel? And I think having like a wild card in there like KD will for sure help. So I think he starts over Drew, which sucks, but it's still dope. I don't know. It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. And then obviously they'll play Australia, like I mentioned, different team from Canada, not quite as much top tier talent, right? But still some guys that are also NBA players, right? Like, as you mentioned, Patty Mills, Joe Ingles, right? Dyson Daniels, is he there?
Yep,
Right?
he's making his debut, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, still some reputable NBA guys.
Dellavedova's playing
Yeah,
too.
Matthew Dellavedova, former
Yeah.
NBA champion, right? So
Yeah.
there's some reputable NBA talent in there, but I would assume that they would, that they'll beat them as well.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, who else do they have coming up as well? I think it's they have Serbia, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So that should be interesting because I feel like what does Jokic look like?
Yeah, exactly.
Because he could drop a 40-point triple double, and that might be raps. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Then after Serbia is South Sudan, and then after South Sudan is Germany. So
yeah,
that's like
GG, bro.
Dennis Schroeder, Franz Wagner.
Yeah, the Wagner boys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, GG's,
yeah, exactly.
bro.
Yeah, so it should be fun. Should be fun, right? And then obviously,
yeah, we should win gold, bro.
Yeah, then after that, July 28th, I think is like the actual kickoff, and that will be Serbia. So
yeah, this is gonna be crazy.
Yeah. So after that, starting, if you're gonna be watching this on Friday, right? Friday kicks off the Las Vegas NBA Summer League, right? So obviously, we know what happens with the Summer League at this point, right? Obviously, you have all the teams in Vegas with mostly first and second year guys, right? Kind of coming together, playing and kind of showing off their talents, right? We went to the Las Vegas Summer League last year, right? Obviously, if you want, you can check out the VOD that we did, right? Or the vlog that we put together, right? Showcasing our experience there, and it was fun, right? We're not going this year, for different reasons, but regardless, still a lot of things, I guess, to kind of look forwards to, right? Like in terms of like a lot of takeaways, possibly storylines. So I guess, what are you kind of like hoping to see, right? In terms of like from any specific players or any specific teams, over the course of, the Summer League? Because obviously, like, this is a draft class that is not regarded quite as highly as the previous one and some other ones in recent memory. But I think there's still, some important players to kind of look at and kind of see what they do. Obviously, again, as we mentioned with the California Classic, take these with a grain of salt. It is the Summer League. It can be very chaotic. Just because somebody plays horrible in the Summer League doesn't mean they're going to be a draft bust. Vice versa is also true as well, right? Reverse is true. So, what are you kind of hoping to take away and see from this Vegas Summer League?
Yeah, so I'm going to start off with a bunch of bias. You can see from the jersey behind me. I'm looking at the Wizards. They have 3 first-round guys that will be on the roster and will be playing. Somehow, some way, Johnny Davis is still in the Summer League. I don't know how, but I guess that's another guy to look out for as well. I think the Wizards, they have a lot of potential. Not necessarily stars, but I think there's a lot of guys here that it's make or break for them. So, you kind of want to have a good showing, a good debut, I think, from all 3 of your first round picks, or else you kind of look like an idiot for trading away Denny Avdia and trading up in the in the draft, the later round of the draft as well. So, I think that's one to watch. Number 2, I'm going Stephon Castle. This is a guy that I think has a lot riding on his career because he's going to be potentially the franchise 2 guard or franchise point guard for the San Antonio Spurs. So what does he look like? I know we've seen him, I think it was in the Utah summer league a little bit. We saw him, play, and I think he showed a lot of good attributes, in terms of what he brings on the defensive end and definitely what he brings on the playmaking end, and just being able to use his body with a great frame as a taller point guard, which is for sure what the NBA is shifting towards. Small guards, they can still get the job done, but if you're elite at that 6'5", 6'6" height, you could be a potential superstar. So that's kind of a guy that I'm looking at as well. I'm trying to think of who else. I think you kind of have to look at Risa Share a lot. I think you have to look at him. Yeah, because he is the number 1 pick. I think there's a lot riding on, his reputation and the Hawks' reputation for sure. So I think, you kind of expect him and hope that he does have a good summer league. And I want to see what he does, against NBA guys. We saw what he's been able to do overseas, but I really want to see what he's able to do against some, guys that are, going to the league as well. So I'm trying to think. There's some other guy. I think that's about it for me.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's other guys you can also, look at as well. Obviously, like, I think one guy that some people will be watching is, the Grizzlies picks, right? Specifically, probably Zach Edey, right? Because obviously he was a top 10 pick in the draft, right? And obviously you're going to assume he's either going to be their starting center or maybe their backup center behind whomever they put out there. And you're going to want to see, like, because he had a solid showing, I guess, but yeah, in the Utah Summer League, right?
Yeah,
and you
want to see him
going, right? Because I think he's turned some heads recently with his, level of play there, right? In terms of, the hopes about his game translating to the professional level. For the Kings, obviously we won't see Devin Carter because he had his shoulder surgery, so he'll be out for at least 6 months, which is pretty brutal, right? Because, I mean, you're pretty much talking about we won't see him probably until at the earliest January, if that at all, right? He may not play for most of the season, right? Because by that point, Sacramento, their fate may already be set at that point, depending on what happens. But, looking around, right? Obviously, you want to see what Reed Shepherd, the 3rd pick, can do for Houston because, again, he's supposed to be the best shooter in the draft. And if he, has a strong showing, he can kind of showcase himself as a good rotational player there. You already mentioned the Wizards, obviously. So, I mean, again, you can kind of bounce around and look around. Minnesota, Rob Dillingham, right?
Yeah,
because obviously the Timberwolves, right? They traded future picks to get this guy, right? So what does he look like? Could he actually be like a viable option as like a, off the bench scoring guard? Because he's not going to start right away, right? But can he showcase his talents, right, as an offensive player?
He will.
So there's a lot of guys. So there's a lot of guys to kind of, really look at, again, even like a team like Charlotte, right, or Chicago, right, where they had guys that they drafted, right? Salon for Charlotte, Bucelas for Chicago, right? You kind of want to see what these guys have got, especially with those teams, right? They're going in, especially for a team like Chicago, they're clearly going in a different direction, right? Like DeRozan's gone, Caruso's gone, Drummond is gone, and there are other guys that could be, on the way out as well, right? So, you kind of want to see, like, did they possibly pick up, a hidden gem? Because this was a guy that was, projected to be a top pick, right? Maybe a year or so ago, right? And his stock fell. And now you kind of want to see what he's got, And then obviously, I guess, last but not least, Utah, right? They had multiple first-round picks, right? Like Collier, Filipowski, right? So you kind of want to see, like, those are other guys that were expected, especially Collier was expected to go much higher. And he was another guy that fell. This was another guy that was projected as a high draft pick a year ago. So, can a lot of these guys that kind of fell in the draft kind of showcase that, yeah, you guys missed out, right? In terms of all you teams that didn't pick us, right? We're going to show you what we can do, right? I guess, there's going to be some eyes on Bronny as well. We talked about that he's probably not going to play for the Lakers during the regular season at all, right? He's going to be a G League guy, which is fine, right? It's the 55th pick of the draft, right? We already talked about him a little bit in the California Classic. But again, like, those are a lot of the main guys to kind of keep an eye on. And there'll be others as well that will have strong, showcasings because it's summer league. So, a lot to look forward to. But just, that's kind of the case. I guess, which team do you feel like, probably has the most amount of talent. I guess they're like, you know, because they have the summer league regular quote unquote exhibition games, and they have the tournament. I think Utah is quote unquote favored by Vegas, right? You know, because I guess they have all those lottery picks and other young guys as well, right? Presumably from the guys from last year's draft.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, second year guys to watch out for. Keontae George, he's been on a tear throughout the Utah Summer League, and obviously he plays for Utah, so I think that's a reason why they're kind of being favorited for sure. And then they have who's the other guy? I think it was Taylor Hendricks. So him coupled with Filipowski, and then obviously Collier. I think they're a team to watch, and they're probably going to win it all. But yeah, they're kind of like the team to watch, I think, because they have so much young talent that needs to kind of take a leap and, show why they were picked in the lottery and things of that nature. And, right. Some of them weren't. So, but I really am a firm believer that Keontae George is going to be the guy to watch in terms of the second year guys.
Yeah. And that's the thing, that
he could take the reins.
Forget about. You said what?
He could take the reins in Utah, because if they're looking to flip like Clarkson or what's his name?
Sexton.
Yes, Colin Sexton. If they're looking to flip them, you don't feel that bad because you're going to get, some potential assets or whatever the case, whatever you're looking for. And then you're still solid with Keontae George at the 1 or 2.
And that's the thing that, we have to remember with Summer League is that there's also second year guys that will be there as well, kind of trying to show, how they've improved as from their first years, right? And, like you said, those should be, in theory, the guys that would be the most dominant because they already have the NBA experience, right, to go along with, what they're going to show in their second years. And again, Utah is a team to watch out for in general just because it's a roster that's kind of in flux, right? Because there's been a lot of rumors tied to that team, right, surrounding a number of guys, including, like you mentioned, right, Colin Sexton, right, Jordan Clarkson, Lauri Markkanen, right, their best player as well, even like a John Collins, right? So that's a roster that could look different, by the time, the season starts or, maybe by the deadline.
Yeah, for sure. I think the Summer League is going to be entertaining because I feel like there's going to be guys that pop off. And there's going to be obviously guys where they're going to have some polarizing games where it's like you were picked this high and you did absolutely nothing. So that's kind of what I'm waiting for. And obviously, people are going to formulate their opinions and stuff, but you really do have to wait until the start of the regular season. But it's always good to see these young guys in action because it can be make or break.
Yeah, exactly. Because sometimes a guy could have a really strong showing, in the Summer League, and based off of that, then they're going to get more opportunities and minutes preseason, regular season, So that's kind of something to think about, right? Like if a guy like a Dalton Connect has a really good Summer League, and then that carries over into like training camp and preseason, that could earn him possibly, more minutes, or even the guys that like, aren't on the actual teams at all, right? Like the guys that are kind of like G League guys or whatever, they can get like another showing, like a strong Summer League showing. Maybe that allows them to get a G League deal. Maybe that allows them to play overseas or something like that. So there's a lot riding on a number of players, even beyond the main guys. It's just obviously the main guys are going to get the attention. And then also there's, always apparently talks about like GMs will be there in Vegas, because they're watching their guys that they drafted, presumably, right? And they're supposedly going to interact, with each other. And, it's been kind of quiet, right, in terms of like the rumors and trade markets, right? Obviously, free agency is still going on, but, you never know. You might have a deal or two done coming out of Vegas as well.
Yeah, it should be fun, though, I think.
Yeah. So now, last but not least on the docket, right, we still have, some guys left in free agency, right? There's still some guys kind of just sitting around, waiting around. They haven't been signed yet to a team that could possibly help a team. And, I guess, where are these guys going to go, I guess, is kind of the first question, right? Because obviously there's, still some possibilities for sign and trades, right? But, the cap space is drying up, right? Because say like a team like Detroit, right? They've kind of used some of their cap space for some guys, right? Like they brought in Malik Beasley, as we already talked about. Since the last time we've recorded, they also claimed Paul Reed off of waivers, right? That's the big man, the backup center that the Sixers waived in order to bring in, some of their other guys on the roster, right? So, he's a guy that's now off the board, but, there's still some other players left. But I guess, first, to be fair, we could also probably get into some of the other guys that recently signed, right? So what do you think of the Paul Reed, signing for Detroit?
I think it's good. You're adding some depth. No, I'm serious. Like, yeah, you're
No,
smiling, but
yeah.
like, no, I'm
agree.
serious.
I
Like,
agree.
I think it's good. You're adding some depth. I know it's Detroit. They're you know, the purgatory of NBA basketball right now, but
Yeah.
you know, I think it's good because it just solidifies some depth, and it just gives you another piece to work around. And you know, you got him for a good deal, I think, and he can
Yeah.
help you.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because
Yeah,
again, like it's another young guy to take a flyer on,
yeah,
right? And with Detroit, it's not like their big man depth is completely solidified anyway. So it's
Mm-mm.
like just might as well just take a flyer on
Yeah,
a guy, and just kind of see where it goes, right?
mm-hmm.
I mean, they do have a number of bigs, but like, are any of them complete locks to stay in Detroit long
No,
term, right? Like maybe not. Like maybe Jalen Duren, but other than that, like Isaiah Stewart, he's been in trade rumors, a lot,
yeah,
right? And they just let go of James Wiseman. So,
right.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, again, like a number of the more recent ones are also like some guys that are kind of returning right to their own team. So we don't need to spend too much time on those, right? Like Haywood Highsmith went back to Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Like Daniel Tice, well, he took a 1 year minimum and he went to New Orleans, right? Maybe he starts, maybe he's the backup. We don't know about the center situation for the New Orleans Pelicans, right? But
Right.
Fontecchio, he went back to Detroit. Malik Beasley went to Detroit. We already talked about
Yep.
that. But let's get more so into some of these guys that are still left on the board, right? Tyus Jones, Markel Fultz, Gary Trent Jr., Spencer Dinwiddie, right? Okoro's a restricted free agent, so that's a little bit different of a situation. Gordon Hayward, Lonnie Walker, Luke Kennard, Pat Bev, Jetty Osman, and then also Landry Shamet and THT.
Yeah.
So in regards to some of these guys that are still left on the board, and then right before we recorded, just to mention, Josh Okogie re-signed with the Suns, so he'll be going back there. Right, kind of a no-brainer move there. You can't really lose a guy that you had on the roster already because you don't get an option to really do too much else. So
Yeah. I mean, looking around, I want to start with the guards. In Markel Fultz, Tyus Jones, and maybe even a Gary Trent Jr. I feel like, they probably want starter money and they aren't going to get that because I think, most of the vacancies have kind of filled up in terms of the starting guards in the NBA right now. So they're going to have to take, a serious pay cut in terms of what they were earning, I think, previously. Like you look at Tyus Jones and, I just don't think he's a starter at this point. I think,
no,
he's going to be a good
back.
backup. So you're going to have to take backup money. And I think that's kind of what's going on here. There's just not a whole lot of waves moving for them. And then like, you want to look at a Gordon Hayward. I just feel like him going to Oklahoma City and not doing anything doesn't help his case considering, I mean, you look at his age and it's like he's not super duper old, but he's not super young. He's 34. But it's the injuries and just how he hasn't been the same guy since. And, what kind of money is he looking for as well? That's another factor as well. So, I am curious where these guys are going to go.
Right.
But like, for the guards, I think it's just the fact that every starting position has pretty much been taken.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing because it's like when you look at a lot of them, like where, because some of them, like in terms of the teams that they may be rumored to go to, they may have to either take basically nothing, right? Like, say, with a Gary Trent Jr., right? Like, he's kind of just waiting right now because he could either, because people have talked about maybe he goes to Milwaukee, right? Or maybe he goes to LA, right? Like, say, for Milwaukee, it's a minimum contract. For LA, they could technically give him more, but they would have to free up the roster spots first in order to get that non-taxpayer MLE. So so if you're the Lakers, you'd have to do that, right? You'd have
Right.
to get rid of those roster spots, which means you'd have to trade the minimums, and you probably would also have to give up seconds or whatever, and you have to find a team that's willing to do that. And then if you do that, then you could get him. But say a team like Milwaukee can just sign him outright. But again, if right, they can clear that up and give him more money, then he probably would rather take that, right?
100%. Yeah.
Versus like, all things, if they're equal, maybe he goes to Milwaukee because they literally don't have a two guard at all, right? In terms of like, we don't know who the starting two guard is going to be,
Right.
right? Jones, again, it feels like probably a sign and trade. I know the last thing that's been mentioned, Chris Herring, right, mentioned maybe Orlando. But again, that would have to be a sign and trade because they've already used all their cap space, right?
Yeah.
So, and then most of the other guys left, right? Like Spencer Dinwiddie's probably getting the minimum, right? Like wherever he goes, right? Like maybe if he goes, like let's say he goes back to LA, right? Like let's say they make deals or whatever, move some guys, and they need a backup point guard. That's a minimum, right? Like he's
Sure.
not getting, like big money at this point in his career, right? Okoro,
Hmm.
I don't know because I have no idea. That's kind of an interesting storyline because he's a restricted free agent. He was a lottery pick, no deal yet, right?
Yeah.
And for the Cavs, they still don't really have any high level wings on their roster. But we know that he's kind of still a flawed option as at the wing, not because he's terrible, but like also like he's not that great. So it's like, do you really want to pay him a ton of money? He improved as an outside shooter, but he's also an undersized wing. Like if you're Cleveland, you'd like to have somebody that's like closer to 6'7" on the roster.
He
They
doesn't
don't
fit
really
their
have
identity.
Yeah, they don't.
He's aged out of their identity, I think.
Right. Yeah,
Because
exactly.
like
And then
you want to
like you
win with
mentioned,
size and like a little bit of girth to them, where it's like, yeah, you can kind of like because the problem is you have Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, who are both very small
yeah,
guards. You don't want a
right.
third guy that's really small.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
You want a bigger, more. He's a good athlete, but he's undersized for a wing, right? Like if he was 6'7" or 6'8", that would probably be relatively fine. But he's not, right?
Right.
We live in the real world here,
Yeah.
so and then again, like you mentioned with the Gordon Hayward, didn't really play well for Oklahoma City, but you could probably still go somewhere for like a minimum, and either ring chase or get minutes somewhere else. Achua, have no clue because obviously the Knicks, they still have some other priorities that they kind of probably need to figure out first before they figure out what to do with him. And then again, like you mentioned with these other guys, Kennard, maybe he goes back to Memphis and they just kind of re-sign him on a cheap deal or whatever. And then I don't know what any of the other guys do, like Lonnie Walker, Jetty Osman, like those are still probably those are still probably minimum contract guys, right? Like and
Yeah.
then like THT, like I don't know, I just don't know because like you mentioned, the roster spots are kind of drying up, and as I mentioned, the cap space is dried up. So most of these guys are either going to have to take less money, or some of them may just not get signed.
Yeah,
Like
that happens.
right? Yeah, because like for some of them, like say like a Landry Shamet, right? Like there's been stuff like maybe they re-sign him for like a cheap-ish deal, right? Like maybe around what he was making already, but like just a longer term contract, because maybe it could be like, oh, nobody traded for him at the deadline, but maybe somebody will trade for him next deadline. Who
Yeah.
knows? Like they did with Sadiq Bey, right? Where which we didn't even mention, right? It was like a 3-year, $20 million contract. He's gonna miss most of next season because of the ACL thing, but he could either be maybe a solid rotational wing, or maybe he could just be relatively mediocre, and it's not really a high cost thing.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I look at it, as a Wizards fan, it's like 3-year deal. What was it? 3-year, 20 mil or something like that. That's like
Right.
$6.5 million per year,
Yeah.
and it's like, I'll take it. That guy, that's cheap for a guy of his, I guess, caliber pre ACL injury. But it's for sure like
Even
a
if
future move, because I feel like if you look at that deal probably 2 years down the line and he's producing at a high level, maybe you can flip him. Who knows?
yeah,
Because I feel like he's
it's
going to
low
get
risk.
solid minutes. Yeah, exactly. Low risk.
Yeah, it's
Very
low
high
risk.
reward.
Yeah, it's low risk because if he pans out and plays well, like you said, that's a solid player on a very affordable contract. And if he
Hmm.
just stinks, then I mean, you didn't really give up anything to get him.
He's
So
not going to add wins, next year or probably even,
right,
the following year. So it's like that fits the bill for what the Wizards are trying to do.
yeah, just you're basically filling out. And again, he's not even going to play for the
Nope.
most of the season. So
Nope.
maybe he might give you some wins, off the bench, right? Because he's cheering on guys, but like it's not going to be on the court thing.
No.
Yeah, so yeah, hopefully we'll kind of see a resolution for some of these guys. But like, Markel Fultz was another one that we haven't mentioned yet, right? He was a backup guard, for Orlando. At one point was a starter, right? And then just had a bunch of injuries last year. So what the heck happens with him?
Yeah, I don't know. He's going to have to take a pay cut because, like I said, when I talked about Tyus Jones and Markel Fultz, I was like, both those guys probably want starter-esque money or, just too much money. And I don't know, because I feel like all the places that I think need him, like, they don't have the cap for him.
Right.
So he's going to have to take a serious pay
Yeah,
cut
like a
in terms of the
minimum or
minimum.
yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if he's gonna go for that.
Right. So what is a good like where would be a good fit for him? I
I
guess
mean,
is the main
me
question.
personally, I would say like, I mean, he's not, because I feel like Markel Fultz is really technically a two guard in a point guard's body, if you want me to be real. But maybe like Phoenix, I don't know, somewhere that needs a point guard. You need a point guard.
Like a backup point guard.
Yes, like you
Okay.
need a backup point guard. So just bring him off the bench. Yeah, that's really my only one for him. But I feel like Tyus Jones kind of fits that bill too, where he could go there. But you know, it's a money thing, and I just
Yeah,
don't
like
know.
yeah, like I feel like it's probably more likely that Tyus Jones gets like a sign and trade thing and avoids having to take a minimum than like Markel
Oh,
Fultz. I just
100%. People are
you
higher
know
on Tyus Jones as a backup than Markel Fultz. Tyus Jones doesn't really get hurt, and we already know the assist to turnover ratio. He's on court coach, you know, as a backup point guard.
right. Well, we could talk about where Killian Hayes might go, but we're not. So
Great,
that's it
yeah.
for today's episode of Off Ball Takes. So let us know your thoughts about Team USA, right? Also about Vegas Summer League, right? Teams you're kind of interested or players you're interested in seeing, or players that you think could turn up for Summer League and players maybe that you might be a little bit lower on, right? And then also some of these remaining free agent guys because there's still some possible impact guys that could help teams, but they're kind of sort of gambles at this point. But either way, again, continue to like, comment, and subscribe, right? We're on the road to 100 subs, and we're very close. We're only 10 subs away as of this
Yes.
video, so hopefully we can get there really soon, maybe possibly by, next week's episode. But regardless, we continue to appreciate all the love and support, and we'll see you in the next episode.